So this concept of going through a dip, which then could either go up or down afterwards, appears in a number of different places.
What obstacles are worth overcoming?
Yeah.
And when should you quit?
So there's a benefit of, even when you recognise you're in a dip and you get through it,
Yeah.
there's a really positive experience of having made it through the dip and come out the other side.
If you do push through, then you can be streets ahead of your competition because they've quit and you've pushed through the dip.
Number one, lack of any progress. Number two, not enjoying it anymore. Number three, lost the alignment with your goals.
Yeah.
And they'd be good reasons to strategically quit.
Everyone is going to go through a dip. Some people get stuck in a cul-de-sac.
To say, no, actually, this is a cul-de-sac you're in. You're not
Yeah.
making the progress. You're not getting the joy out of it. It's not aligned with your goals. This isn't something that you have to carry on with.
Yeah.
Put some energy into finding an escape route.
So
Oh, God.
I had some...
Whenever you start a sentence so, followed by a laugh, I start bracing myself. My muscles tense. What's happening now?
What's he going to say?
going to say?
So I had some leftover phyllo pastry
Oh,
the
yeah.
other day. And I was experimenting with a little bit of batch cooking, as you do.
Right.
And I made a really nice chicken tikka pie thing.
Lovely.
You're waiting for the catch there.
Yeah.
But it got me doing a bit of research into pies, which I thought you might be interested in.
Okay, yeah. A bit of this pie corner.
Pie corner.
Pie general knowledge
Pie.
section of our
But
podcast.
so in Jamaica, you can get steak and kidney pie for £1.75, a chicken and mushroom pie for £1.60, and an apple pie for £2.15, which is pretty good. In St Kitts, you can get a steak and kidney pie that will cost you £2, but a chicken pie without mushrooms is £1.70, and a cherry pie can be yours for £1.95. In Trinidad and Tobago, that steak and kidney pie comes in at £2.50, but you can get two for £3.50, while the chicken and mushroom pie is £2.25, two for £3.25, and they also offer a meat and potato pie for £2 or two for £3. And those are the pie rates of the Caribbean.
No, please. That is 5 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back.
You loved it.
Dude.
You know, you're all going to be using that now.
If you've got the stamina to
If
get
you've got the
through all
stamina to get through all
pie
those
prices
pies.
before the punchline.
Pie prices. So yeah, pie rates of the Caribbean. I saw that, I read that, I thought, you know what?
Yeah, Dave will like that.
I'm going to save that for the podcast.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks. I'm so honoured that you felt it was worth that saving up for.
So yeah, I thought I quite liked it. It's quite a clever little pun.
I think before we get to any more dad jokes as the preamble, we're going to cut straight to a podcast. Thanks for that. Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow, where every week we try and come up with something useful, interesting, and hopefully not dad joke laden for owners and managers of small and medium-sized businesses. This is episode 107. 107. So just in time-honoured fashion, where have we come from? What were the last three? Because people may not have listened to them all end to end.
So episode 106 was talking about our experience of building a SaaS company, Magic Minutes.
Also known as a bit of therapy for us too.
Yeah, that was very cathartic, and worked through some issues there.
Yeah, exactly.
Picked ourselves off the floor from fetal position, so that's all good. So that's, yeah, but the point of that was just lessons that we've learned through 10 years of trying to build a SaaS company.
And we keep saying it's so difficult to get people to talk about their business failures because there's this implied bad connotation about that, when in fact it's only through going through those failures that people eventually succeed. So we did our bit.
And we learned a lot of lessons, put our money where our mouth is, all that type of thing.
Yep.
So 105 was an episode where we talked about 10 things that we would like to have known at the start of our career.
Yeah. One of which I remember was learning from your mistakes.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember that?
I don't really. It was a memorable episode.
Which does relate to what we were just talking about on our lessons from
and that
SaaS business.
It was slightly inspired through some of our YouTube data where we see a lot of 25 to 40-year-old people coming through. So we thought we'd do something where we would reminisce on what we would like to have known, pass on some wisdom. And 104 was a episode around an episode around manufacturing.
You
growth.
almost forgot there, didn't you? You were stumbling. You're playing for time.
I was like, I wonder if anyone will notice.
Yeah, no, they'll edit it out. It'll be fine. Yeah.
No, so an episode around manufacturing growth brackets using HubSpot.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't look up. We said last week
No.
about the song titles with brackets in.
I'm not sure manufacturing growth brackets using HubSpot would have been in the top 10.
No, maybe not. It's not really catchy enough, is it?
Anyone who's got a musical bent, please send in your best rendition.
So they were the last three, 106, 105, 104. So 107 this week. And you've come up with another interesting one, this time based on a book by one of our favourite authors.
So there's a book by an author called Seth Godin, who is a preeminent marketing guru.
He is. Is he the Purple Cow Man?
Purple Cow Man. And he wrote a book a number of years ago called The Dip. And it's all about this concept of when you start something new, you've got all this excitement. But oftentimes what happens is you find yourself in a dip after that initial burst of excitement. And it's how you overcome that. So
now there's dips. When you think about that sort of thing, I remember we talked about the Gartner hype cycle.
Yeah.
And there's a dip after that, isn't there? And similarly with team formation, the whole storming, forming, norming, performing business, there's that sort of thing as well. And there's one around about conscious incompetence and all of that, and how you become aware of how little you know. So this concept of going through a dip, which then could either go up or down afterwards, appears in a number of different places. But his examples were more about either personal challenges, business challenges, that type of thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think he's talking about in the book that there's a lot of obstacles in life, whatever we are, business, personal life.
Life ain't easy.
And not every single one of them is worth putting the effort in to overcome. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about, because a lot of what you hear, particularly around the successful businesses, is that we had these challenges and we just kept on going and we persevered, and hey, look, now we're some unicorn company that's making all this money, and aren't we amazing?
The success, the storytelling bias,
the storytelling bias, the success bias and all that. So what he's trying to do in the book is to help you differentiate between what obstacles are worth overcoming and when should you quit.
And yet I think his biggest value wasn't so much helping you understand which is which, because there's still a lot of subjectivity around that and there's no magic bullet to the answer. It's more about introducing the concept that it's okay. Yeah. It's recognizing that you don't have to either persevere or you have to give up when you hit a dip, that both could be viable outcomes. And
so then that leads to a sort of, how do you then think about, how do you evaluate a given situation to make sure that you're investing your time, your energy, your resources into something that is actually going to be worthwhile doing? Yeah. So the dip, and I struggle a bit with the metaphor sometimes because we use language like overcoming and obstacles. They sound like high things you've got to get over, and the dip is something low that you've got to get through. But I guess when he's talking about the dip, it's you're feeling low about it. You're feeling as if your energy is being drained and you're not sure if it's, your whatever success metric you're looking for, that's what's dipped. But that obstacle thing is probably something I more think about. Activation energy is another thing that scientists know all about, isn't it? So can we get over the hump to make it so we're going downhill again? So if you imagine the start of this podcast, you probably experienced a dip about... I think a lot of our listeners... about 30 to 40 seconds in. Just before the punchline, I was at my lowest. So that's kind of why I brought that in, just so people could feel it. Very class. See what you did there. The visceral feeling of like, I didn't realise that. Oh my goodness, this is good. I'm going to have to persevere here. Yeah. So, but congratulations if you're still listening. You didn't quit. You got through the dip. Through that very long dad joke. Stronger and better to go. So why does it matter? I think it matters because everyone is going to go through this at some point. If you're running a business, you're certainly going to go through this. I was talking to somebody this morning who said, if you'd have told me, and I'm telling them about what we're going to talk about in the podcast, said if you'd have told me this in December, I probably would have quit. Oh, wow. Okay, right. But things obviously picked up now and it's okay. Through the dip. So there's a benefit of, even when you recognise you're in a dip and you get through it, there's a really positive experience of having made it through the dip and come out the other side. So I think there's this, We're all going to go through it. Everyone has that initial excitement when they start a job or when there's a new project. We talked last episode 106 about our SaaS journey, and there were many times in that where you think we've got the new feature, this is the killer app, this is the thing that's going to do it. You release the product, you start the job, whatever, and you come through that and you're like, actually, well, that didn't meet expectations. This hasn't happened.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that episode is partly what inspired this one, wasn't it? We went through a number of dips on that, where the number of new sign-ups dipped, literally, or flatlined, and we didn't know whether to carry on or not.
So what Seth Godin points out in his book is that at that point of the dip, that's when a lot of people quit. Because they can't see a way out of it. They think, okay, well, I've invested all this money into a new venture, time, resources, reputation, etc. Hasn't quite worked out. Do I keep rolling the dice, or do I just call it a day at this point?
Yeah.
So what he's saying is, if you can actually if you can push through that, A, you've got to evaluate, is it worth doing? Is it worth pushing through?
Yeah.
But B, if you do push through, then you can be streets ahead of your competition, because they've quit and you've pushed through the dip. So that's why and oftentimes that whole kind of, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, Nietzschean quote. There is an element where you come through those challenges of the dip and you come out stronger, wiser.
And you've learnt lots.
You've learnt a load of
You're
stuff.
more able to cope with a similar dip in the future. But there's an important distinction he draws from that, as it's not always a dip that has a positive ending. It could be what he calls a cul-de-sac, which is a kind of a dead end dip, isn't it? It's the point where you have to distinguish between the dip and the cul-de-sac to know that sometimes it's not going to teach you more to carry on going through it, and some people do, and there's a big downside of doing that, both in terms of your energy, the opportunity cost of doing so, but people still do it anyway.
And it's like looking at, so no matter how much persistence you put into it, if you are in a cul-de-sac situation, things aren't going to improve. And
if it's a true cul-de-sac, that's the definition of the cul-de-sac. They will never improve.
And if you've listened to, again, our last episode, we probably got to the point where we were in a cul-de-sac with it. I think if we were giving it an honest assessment, I think we had a few dips that led us to a cul-de-sac.
And we suffered from one of the key things which he describes as the reasons people carry on through cul-de-sacs thinking they're dips, and it's partly the sunk cost fallacy. And yet we're both economically trained and savvy, and we both understand the sunk cost fallacy, and that once it's spent, and you shouldn't use that to factor in your future decisions because you can't change it. But nevertheless, it has a very powerful draw on your decision making. So just because you've spent a lot of money to get somewhere doesn't mean that's a justification for carrying on. And
I think as well, that is particularly strong when it's your money. And I think for a lot of business owners that listen to this podcast, who it's your money that you're putting into your business, or it's your money that you're paying someone to develop a product for you, or whatever that is, the sunk cost fallacy is a bit of it's true, but it's quite theoretical at that point, isn't it? Because you're saying, well, this isn't like I've got 100 grand of someone else's money that I've invested, and it's actually that's 100 grand that is gone.
And it's like the gambler's fallacy, isn't it? When you've lost money, you double your stake and try and win it back. And I think there's a really good argument here for why you need an outsider, someone who doesn't own the money, but someone who can challenge your thinking in a way that you're prepared to listen to them. And I guess we do this all the time in our non-exec board work, which we do, or even when we're going through sales and marketing processes in our day-to-day work of doing this go-to-market work that we do, when you're having to challenge sales directors sometimes on why something hasn't happened. Because if they have to challenge it, despite having put all the effort in, they are going to try and justify their current position because it's that's just consistent, isn't it? Psychologically, you can't possibly hold the two thoughts in your own head at the same time. And so you need someone else to be able to really challenge you. Are you in a dip on this? Is this approach that you're using, this marketing technique that you've had for years, which doesn't seem to be working, but you're carrying on doing it? You're still going to exhibitions, or you're still not going to exhibitions, depending which is working, or you're still sending out 1,000 emails a day and it's not working. Why are you still doing that? And that's kind of in this dip where people, I don't know what it is. It's a fear of having to think of an alternative rather than just stopping it and waiting for inspiration to strike. But you sometimes need the outsider to shake you out of your
I suppose there's sort of an action bias, I suppose, isn't there? We do things because we think, well, at least we're doing something. But I think there is that interesting thought. I was thinking, well, this doesn't necessarily have to be at a macro level, i.e. is a business in a dip or not, or a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
It could be at the individual strategic level of a marketing strategy. So emails seem to be working really well, but inbound ebook lead magnet thing is not really doing anything. No matter how much effort we put into making beautifully crafted things, they're not working. Or whatever it is, you could go through each of those. And I suppose as well, for being blunt about it, people. Everyone is going to go through a dip. Some people get stuck in a cul-de-sac, and kind of. It's probably a whole other podcast, that, to be honest.
Now that could get a bit heavy. Yeah, exactly.
So he's talking about how do you differentiate whether you're going through a dip or whether you're actually stuck in a cul-de-sac. And I think, trying to step back and be objective about that, getting some wise counsel from other people around you is always useful, objective counsel on that. But then it's that point of, okay, so if you are in a cul-de-sac, should you quit? And his advice is, well, yeah, because you're burning.
If you know you're in a cul-de-sac.
If you know you're in a cul-de-sac and you realise, well, we've been putting consistent effort into something, we're not seeing the returns, we're not seeing the results. We're running out of ways that we can improve this, and we've tried as much as we can within our resources. Then it's maybe time to quit. So he talks about how to quit well and how to quit strategically. Yeah. And I think that's another important part of things. And I think as well, again, we've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast, about the whole fear of failure in the British culture around failure and all that type of thing. But I think this is a good way of thinking about it in terms of strategic quitting. And
well, you need to legitimize that decision and say, actually, there are positives that come out of quitting. Yeah. I'm freeing up some resource. The ugly sister of sunk cost is opportunity cost, and actually that's something that we inadvertently incur all the time. Every time you choose to do something, you can't be doing something else that's inconsistent with it or at the same time. So there is a really positive reason to quit strategically when you've decided to do so. Yeah. If you can justify to yourself, but it means I can do this instead, rather than just saying, I'm not doing that anymore.
And I think that, again, every time you talk about this, going back to the last episode, the whole idea of quitting and failing fast is a SaaS terminology that's used often. I think we probably failed fast at some things. Other things we didn't fail fast at all, because you're stuck in a cul-de-sac, you're stuck in this sunk cost fallacy. And again,
but if you had alternatives, and I think I think compare this to when there are groups of companies owned by a holding company or an investment company like a private equity house, where they've got a very easy alternate use of time, money, energy, then it's a lot easier to be quite objective about the fact that, well, that business just isn't performing, its market or timing isn't right, or product doesn't match. This one is, so we're going to reduce investment in that one and increase investment in that one. Now, when you're only in one company and you don't have sister companies, subsidiaries, alternatives, you've built so much of your self-worth, your description of who you are to yourself into that thing, you haven't invested any time to build alternatives or other options. So you kind of just stick to the one you've got. You're in a bit of a rut. You can't see out of that rut, so you carry on going down it. Yeah.
Well, I think that's interesting as well. So you could apply that to at a personal level. So one of the things that got me thinking about this, so I was on the board of a food bank for 11 years. And I've let that go this week.
Right. And then, how are you feeling about
that? I'm actually feeling positive about it, to be honest, because I'm not just quitting it. I'm quitting it because I've got some other projects that I need to work on, and that needs my energy and my focus. And back to this whole, you've only got so much resource. But I think it's important, if you quit, that you reallocate whatever capital, emotional investment, time, whatever it is, at whatever level, business, personal, etc., that you're actually reallocating rather than just quitting. I think that's partly his point here, is that it's about directing resources to somewhere rather than just saying, I'm giving up.
Yeah. So he comes up with some example questions to ask yourself to work out whether you might be in a dip that has an outcome, positive outcome, or you're in a cul-de-sac. And he kind of got the sort of three things you can ask. So what are the three things that he says that are signs that you should persevere?
So number one, do you still feel challenged and motivated by what you're doing? Because that's a big driver. I think the second one if you are seeing progress, if you're seeing some green shoots come through and you are seeing some incremental gains, then that's a good sign that things are heading in the right track. They may not be going as fast as you want, but so that. And then number 3 would be if you're getting feedback from people who are expert or who have maybe a mentor, someone who understands your product or industry, and if they're saying, well, actually what you need to do is just wait a bit longer because of X, Y, and Z, or they're giving you some advice from their experience, then that can be another kind of guiding principle. So you've really got those 3 points around, is it still fun? Are you motivated by it? Number 2, are you seeing some growth? And number 3, have you got people around you that are telling you this is worthwhile pursuing?
Yeah. And so similarly, when he says ideas to prompt your decision that it is a cul-de-sac, they're kind of corollaries for that, but they are subtly different, aren't they? That he says, number 1, if there's lack of any progress, that's a corollary to, when you're in a dip, it's the other way around. So number 1, if there's lack of any progress. Number 2, if you've lost your joy of doing it, if the purpose isn't working for you anymore, then that's a strong sign that maybe you're in a cul-de-sac, regardless of whatever else you're seeing. And number 3, if it's not aligning anymore with your goals.
Yeah.
So if you don't feel as if even through persevering, even if it were to be a dip rather than a cul-de-sac, it's changed in some way. The experience has changed the project, the target, the reason for doing it, no longer aligned, so it's not worth doing it. So number 1, lack of any progress. Number 2, not enjoying it anymore. Number 3, lost the alignment with your goals. Yeah. And they'd be good reasons to strategically quit. Yeah. Responsibly quit.
Responsibly quit, and I think that is true. I mean, I had a conversation with someone today who was leaving this company actually. And I said, you want to leave well. I think anywhere you leave, you want to leave well. So that's how people remember you. It's your reputation. It's just the right thing to do. So don't quit out of, spate of frustration or whatever.
Yeah, or panic
or what.
Knee-jerk reaction.
Have a plan for how you exit, hand over things well, make sure that you've squared everything away as much as you can. And then I think you're much more free to move forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important part of this is making sure that you can move forward cleanly and actually quite quickly into something, because I think otherwise there's that danger that you kind of get left in limbo, and you see quite a lot of people that have that as a life or kind of sitting around with no purpose and whatever.
And he talks a bit about why it is that people end up in more of these, and I related to one of them, which is that inability to say no, or unpreparedness to say no, and you get involved in too many things. So if you spread yourself too thinly, then you'll feel as if you're in dips here, there and everywhere, because you're not giving them the right energy. So I think it's only fair on everybody then, both from that opportunity cost point of view and the alignment with your goals and your purpose, that you don't just say yes to stuff and almost get in the way of other people who'd be doing a more dedicated job at it. So he talked a bit about that, didn't he?
He talks about that and embracing scarcity, and actually making yourself as a resource kind of scarce. So being expert at what you do, it may not be that you're the best in the world, but maybe you're the best in your company, or you're the best in your industry, or whatever that is. But working towards that, because that then commands premium. It sort of drives that kind of I suppose it was one of the things that can help you get through a dip if you are good at what you do. But I think there's a danger of that, like you said there, of you can end up spreading yourself too thin if you need to be good at everything, or you're just one of those people that has to, I think capable people get asked to do stuff a lot, and you see that in a lot of businesses where people who are good, there's that whole
if you want anything done, ask a busy person.
Yeah, well, that whole equation, isn't there? Around 50% of what gets achieved is done by the square root of the number of people in the company.
Oh, yes, I'd heard that before, which is quite a shocking
it's a shocking number.
Stat,
so if you've got 100 people in your company, 10 of them are the ones that are creating 50% of the value. And I'm sure there's a couple of people now that are doing that maths and thinking, I know where they are.
Add up the list, am I on it?
But I think that is, if you are one of those people, then you can end up getting asked to do a lot of things, taking on more responsibility, and it's very easy to quickly spread yourself thin. And then when you do find yourself in a dip or something, it can be quite hard to actually work yourself out of it, because you're just knackered. So,
well, especially if in the smaller situations you feel as if you're going to be letting other people down. So that's where you've got to plan it and get out of it responsibly. So he talks that this could be applied in business situations like we talked about, personal situations, entrepreneurial ideas that you come up with, your careers. It's quite an interestingly broadly applicable concept. But I still think we all end up getting trapped when we're in the dip and you don't actually think about it. So it's a good prompt to ask if that's something. I remember I had a similar role when you were talking about your food bank. I was a trustee of a charity helping with a local heritage project, but it changed direction. And I realised that the reason that I'd been asked on it no longer meant that my particular skills were what it needed at that time. And whilst nobody was asking me to leave, and I could have stayed there forever and stayed for the ride, it was a voluntary role, but back to the opportunity cost thing, I knew that I'd said yes, probably out of reasons of loyalty to support the chairman and support the project. But it was the right time for me to move on from it.
Yeah.
But it was hard. You do have this inbuilt bias of carrying on and that fear of, is this me giving up on something? Have I failed at it? Well, no, you're just reallocating your resources, which is your time.
Which I think is a really nice way of framing it, actually. And I think that's what he says around if you do quit something, make sure you've got something you can go to so you're not rudderless.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really important principle to say you've always got to have something that you're going to aim at. You're not just leaving for the sake of leaving.
Yeah.
That you're leaving with a purpose, another purpose, that you're going to just take that experience, those skills, leverage those onto your next
The people I have an awful lot of sympathy for are those that are in a dip. They know that it is a cul-de-sac and not a dip, so they want to move out. But the very nature of the cul-de-sac they're in is consuming so much of their time, partly because it's misaligned to their skills maybe, or they just haven't got the mojo for it anymore. But they haven't got the time to build themselves the escape route. And I've had people even apply to us or talk to me about coming to work in our industry before, and they're trying to get out of something else. And there's one who I know particularly well is a teacher, and she wants to get out of teaching and come and do this. And there's someone else who's an MD of a company that we've both spoken to before who would like to get into the sort of work we do. They're really fascinated by it. But they're so trapped in a way by the amount of time that their current project, job, whatever, is demanding of them, that they can't do the prep work required. They can't get themselves skills ready for what it is they want to do next. So they end up justifying to themselves that, well, I've got to stay then, even though they're in not at all a happy place. And you wonder, well, there's no bit of advice I can give someone like that other than do it and cope with the consequences. There'll be short-term pain from you having ejected yourself out of that situation without necessarily the escape route. But that's the only thing you can do if you're going to get to a better place in the future. But if people are worried about dependence and mortgages and all that sort of things, then I can totally understand that that's very pithy advice and not necessarily implementable.
Well, I think as well, the whole cul-de-sac thing, I was just talking about that. And thankfully not so much now, but there was a time when we were working with quite a few companies when we were on Barclays Bank turnaround panel for a while, for a decade or so. And companies have got themselves into serious cash flow problems. That tended to be when we got invited in. Yeah. Thank you.
Last ditch.
But you almost end up in a cul-de-sac situation there where the amount of effort that goes into resolving cash flow meant that there was just no time or energy available to actually grow the business. And
well, you see these people doing daily cash flow forecasts and fielding calls from irate creditors all the time and they're having to chase up your debtors and all that. It's just all consuming, and you forget actually that your primary role is to add value and to find more customers to add value to.
Discounting things to get the fees in.
All the wrong behaviours, And you realise the real intervention should have happened a long time ago, but it's one of those, when's the best time to plant an oak tree? 30 years ago. Well, second best time is today. You have to do that.
So, I mean, there's loads of other things you can go into that and look at case studies and things, but I thought it was just an interesting...
Well, maybe the takeaway thought is not only for those people listening that might be in a dip to reassure themselves that it is a dip and worth persevering, which is a very positive thought. Be aware that it might be a cul-de-sac, so be careful of that and have alternatives. But maybe also a takeaway is to look at the people around you, people you work with, people in your social life, and wonder if they're in a low point at the moment. Is that something that you could have, buy them the book, tell them about the philosophy, help them come to the view of whether it's okay to persevere or it's okay, and it's give them permission almost by opening the subject to say, no, actually, this is a cul-de-sac you're in. You're not making the progress. You're not getting the joy out of it. It's not aligned with your goals. This isn't something that you have to carry on with. Put some energy into finding an escape route.
Exactly.
That'd be a nice thing to do. Well, good luck in finding a successor venture for your food bank work. I know you've done a lot of good stuff on that.
I've already got one, so
there you go. You've prepared it beforehand. You've practiced.
Well,
you've preached.
Well, that's why I had to give it up. So I need the time. So
I haven't got time to do both.
Yeah.
Good.
So.
Another good episode. Very thought-provoking again. We're getting much. These last few have been very philosophical.
Esoteric.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I hope everyone's enjoying it. Thank you again for listening to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. Another thought-provoking episode this week. So I hope you found that enjoyable. And if you have, please pass it on to other people you know and do the usual thing of following us and sharing what we're doing through your social and real-life channels. And in the meantime, good luck with your business.